Welcome to the Whiskey Congress. Honest, open talk dedicated to speaking the truth to those who are open to hearing it. Black, white, right, left. Most importantly, honest, bold, and fueled by good whiskey. In Whiskey Veritas, we are Whiskey Congress. Join the evolution.
Whiskey Congress is back in session. Our first show post-Christmas, pre-New Year's, although it'll actually come out shortly after. But how was your Christmas, man? Good to see you again. It's been a while.
Yeah, Christmas was good. Got to see the family and the parents and all that stuff, so it was good. Since then I've been all over Ohio, from Youngstown to Cleveland to Columbus and everywhere in between. So, a lot of driving the great Buckeye State.
The great state of Ohio. Well, my Christmas was in Buffalo, New York. And we'll talk about the storm later, but I'll give you the inside details off the air. Sorry, everybody, it won't make sense to you, but I got some good ones for you, man. But, all right, we'll get to that later. We got to talk about January 6th, but I want to start with talking about Representative-elect George Santos of New York. So George Santos, who I didn't know until today, is an openly gay Republican representative-elect who basically lied about absolutely everything on his resume. Said he went to a certain college in New York, didn't. Said he worked for Goldman Sachs, didn't. Said he worked for Citigroup, didn't.
Well, hold on, back up. So he didn't graduate from college, period.
Correct.
So,
okay.
You know what I mean? Well, I mean, 'cause it's one thing to
That's true.
But he didn't graduate. Like, it's not only did he not graduate from it, like, he didn't go anywhere, right?
Right.
So, and then he lied about working for Goldman Sachs. He lied about working for Citigroup. And apparently he's not Jewish, although his whole thing is that he's Jew-ish. Kind of. Like, I'm kind of Jewish. Like, I don't understand. Like,
I think his one parent was Jewish, but I wasn't raised that way, so
yeah,
whatever.
It's, like, this guy, you led with he's openly gay with, which you could ask, like, I'm not sure why that even matters, but
it does not matter at all.
Right. I mean, I guess it's important to know that we have, different people at different, whatever,
backgrounds,
different backgrounds and positions of leadership. So I guess on the one hand, it is relevant to a degree, but I mean, with a guy like this who's lied about so many things, I mean, this guy lied about his mother dying of 9/11 related illnesses, and no one can find any information on that whatsoever.
And she died in 2016.
Right. So it's just like, a lot of people. Now, look, there are a lot of people suffering, right? But
sure.
From illnesses related to 9/11.
Sure.
Even still today, which is a big reason why, Jon Stewart was, fighting and trying to,
sure.
convince Congress to pass the 9/11 victims bill. But, if his mom was dying of 9/11 related illnesses, then there would be some documentation of it somewhere that he or someone would be able to provide, which, normally you would say you would leave that alone. But, like, look, you've lied about everything. It seems like this is probably not true. If you've said anything that's true, you need to prove it at this point.
Right.
Like, sorry, your
sure.
word means nothing. Even to the point where, where I was going is that, listen, you can even question, is he even gay? Well, and I'm not joking,
no,
right? Like,
right.
I mean, the guy was married, and, did he just say, let me check all the boxes, right? I work for Goldman Sachs, I work for Citigroup, I went to this school, I'm gay, I'm Jewish, I fought in the Ukrainian war. Like,
my grandparents died in the Holocaust is something else he claimed.
Oh,
also
right,
not true.
Right.
Which is gross on top of everything else.
Yeah, I mean, he's also under investigation. Now, he's not under investigation for these lies. He's under investigation for money that he put into his campaign, which the way he did it would be illegal. So, he should not be seated as a congressman.
I agree. He will be.
It's just like he's going to be, but I mean, the right thing to do would be to resign. But he's, a Republican, and they're just at a point where they do something wrong, they just say nuh-uh, and then that's just it. So he's not going to resign. I think he's going to have to get, in order to remove him, you're going to need an indictment from the feds, with substantial proof, I think. To get him out of that seat, which I think, Republicans aren't saying much about it because they won't, right? Like,
sure.
they will act like it's not happening, and then however it resolves, it'll get resolved, and then if he gets removed, then they'll come out and say, well, we have to remove liars, and we don't want liars, and blah, 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 blah.
Sure.
And they may not even say that much. They'll make some sort of general statement about it, similar to, anything revolving around Trump, right? I mean, even now that he's out of office, they're still sort of tiptoeing around him because they fear him, although they're getting a little bit bolder as he gets more and more ridiculous. So,
yeah, I saw an interview with him on Fox by Tulsi Gabbard. She actually...
With George Santos, right?
Yes, with George Santos interviewing. She was filling in for my buddy Tucker Carlson, and she actually didn't let him off the hook. She actually did a fairly good job with the interview. But there's two aspects of this that I want to talk about. First, and let's stay where you were. He needs to be removed from this position, and if the Republicans had anything resembling integrity, they would lead the charge.
Yeah.
They should say, you're part of our team, and you did these things, and we don't want to be associated with the things that you did. That would be the respectable thing to do. I'm not going to get on a high horse and say, Democrats wouldn't allow this. But I'm going to say, if Democrats had a guy who did this, I would be saying the exact same thing. You can't make up everything. What was it, George O'Leary? Who was the football coach who lost the gig at Notre Dame? He lied about something on his resume about, like, being a graduate assistant or something at some school.
Yeah, he lied about where he coached. And, I think he lied about him where he graduated from, or if he graduated, something along those lines as well.
And gone.
Yeah.
Done. And this is a little bit more important than the head coach of Notre Dame. This is a U.S. lawmaker. Well, maybe
big portion of the country
I take that back. Never mind.
But to your point, right? Like, I mean, if you can get fired from a job that you didn't even start at Notre Dame because you lied on your resume, you should be able to get fired from Congress because of similar actions. Worse, right? Worse.
Your
lies.
entire resume.
And also, like, now he's being investigated by the feds for illegal campaign contributions. So. I think they've got the ammunition, but again, you use the word integrity, and it's not really their thing. So,
true.
They're going to wait until their hand is forced, and I think the only thing that really forces that hand to remove him from that seat ultimately will be an indictment from the Department of Justice.
So we're on the same page there. Now, what I've not heard anyone on mainstream media say, and I've listened to a fair bit of stuff on this, is this is just another example of how Democrats can fuck up a two-car funeral. Mm-hmm. I mean, you're running against this guy. You have to have an opposition research team. And I know it was a stacked deck.
Can we pause? I have never heard that before. What? Fuck up a two-car funeral?
Really? I'm surprised you haven't heard it from me 10 times.
I'm not 100% sure I understand what it means.
It means that if all you got to do is line up two cars to drive, and you can't even get that fucking right.
Gotcha.
But okay. All right.
Well, I hadn't heard it.
I'm surprised, but okay. Yeah. And anyway. But you're doing opposition research on this guy. You're in New York City. He claims to have worked for gold. Like, I don't blame them for not looking to his college records, because if I told someone, hey, I went to WVU and I did all these things.
So I got a little insight on this.
Oh, here we go.
So this is what happened. Essentially, the Democratic candidate that Santos was running against did raise these issues. His campaign did. But they didn't really have the money to do much with it in terms of getting it into ads and really kind of blowing it up. The candidate that particular Democratic candidate wasn't expected to win, so the DNC did not put any money in his campaign to get more ad time, to put these findings in the ad. So the candidate, and I apologize, I don't know, it's not New York, I don't know who the Democratic candidate for Congress was in this particular, but because the national DNC party basically wouldn't back him because they assumed that it was a seat that was going to go, because it was Long Island, I guess, is the
Long Island, a bit of Queens.
Yeah, so that particular area was basically just sort of deemed that it was going to go to a Republican, and so Democrats did not, like I said, the national Democrats, the DNC, opted not to put money in that candidate's campaign, which, going back to, so you were right, but now we have, a more clear example of how they screw things up, right? Like, it would make sense, if you can get another seat, right? And this guy's got some, pretty explosive stuff that he lied about on his resume. That alone may have been able to shift some things, right? And so why they wouldn't fund a targeted, ad space for, going after him on these things, especially, because the opponent found this stuff sort of late in the game. But it was early enough where it definitely could have made an impact, right? Like this wasn't like the day before the election. This was, a month or two out where, you really are starting to pick up with ads and everything else. And they said, nah, you're probably going to lose, so we don't care, right? Like it was one of those things like, oh, we got another email from so-and-so in New York and delete. So the Democrats missed the opportunity to gain a seat by, really going after him before the election. And now they're dealing with the fact that he's probably going to get seated. And if he's not indicted, then you don't really have a way to pull this guy out. And now you've got literally a pathological liar in a congressional seat, which is just insane.
Yeah, well, is it?
Yeah,
we got Marjorie Taylor Greene, we got Lauren Boebert, we got Matt Gaetz, we got.
The thing is, like with them, it's not. Well, yeah, you're right, but it's different with them because they just throw out bullshit theories.
Right.
Like this guy is just bullshitted about everything.
He's a house of cards. I mean, he literally is a.
It's all coming down, and yet he's still likely going to get rewarded for it, right?
Yep.
So it's, we clearly have multiple cracks in our, Democratic Republic armor. The number of things that Trump was able to get away with, and that we knew, and yet he was still able to get elected. And then the things he did while he was in the White House, right? And you look at some of the stuff that came out about Trump, right? What he said about women, he'd grab them by the pussy, and like some of his like sketchy real estate deals and the taxes, which his taxes are going to get released tomorrow, by the way.
All right.
And it's thousands of pages. It'll be interesting to see what they say. I'm not sure what happens because of any of this, but you go through all the litany of things that Trump said, that Trump did, was still able to get elected, and then once he was in the White House, some of the things that he just literally scoffed at and refused to do, and then it's just like you couldn't do anything to get this guy out of office, even though he was clearly unfit to be there. So, with George Santos being a congressman, it's basically playing out again, right? Like you have someone's clearly unfit to be there.
Meet the new boss, same as the old boss.
Yeah, and yet there's, again, the only thing that you can bank on is that he really screwed up this whole tax or this whole campaign contribution thing, and that's what gets him out. And yes, that's what I'm rooting for because I don't want this guy in Congress. I don't care if he's a Republican or a Democrat or an independent or a space alien, right? Like, I mean, if he's just a pathological liar who's just blatant about it, and look, all this stuff is verifiable. Yeah. Right? So, I mean, if you're lying about stuff that's easy to fix and you're not even remotely trying to cover up your lies, right? he goes.
He's admitted it now.
Right. What's amazing, though, he admits it, but then says in the same sentence, I'm not a fraud. I'm not a fake. I'm not like somebody who defrauds the government. You defrauded the American people by lying about who you were and what built you into being what you are. Right? When I talk about Ron DeSantis, right, what do I say? He was top of his class at Ivy League school in undergrad. Right. He was top of his class in law school, Ivy League school. Military experience, all that stuff. All that stuff is verifiable. All that stuff we know is true because you can pull the records, right? So for this guy to lie about stuff that is easily verifiable that his opponent did discover and did try to put out there, and yet he still manages to get elected and will be seated as a congressman, just shows you that we have serious problems with our system right now.
Agreed.
That have been exposed.
But I think I sort of stand by my statement. I altered a little bit, not knowing what you just told me because I thought it was out of the blue. But this is then. So my criticism is
your criticism of the Democratic Party is absolutely on point.
But now it's the DNC and not their opposition research folks.
Yeah.
So which is worse because now it's up top.
Well, yeah, but I think it shows that there's a bigger problem with the DNC because part of the issue with Santos and that seat itself is that from what I gather, essentially Democrats in New York basically made a deal with Republicans, right? Like, look, you're probably going to win this seat, and we know that. So in exchange, we want X, but for that, we're not really going to fight you for this particular seat, right? Like, so it goes to this issue of Democrats really not being a unified party, because you've got the Democrats in New York that are making deals with Republicans for seats. I mean, it's one thing if you're making deals about legislation, right? Sure. Like going back and forth, because it's compromise, and I say all the time that's necessary. But if as a party, you have this general sort of theme or idea or umbrella or however you want to describe it, that you're pushing for a better America or whatever, then the only way you're going to do that, like, it's not enough to just have a Democratic president in the White House. Like, you got to try to get as many congressional seats as you can. You got to try to win as many Senate seats as you can. And so to give those up, right, the actual, positions of power that dictate, how we, how we spend money, what laws are on the books, you know what I mean? Like, who goes,
sure,
all these different things, like, to give that up, right, just for backdoor deals and all that sort of stuff, just goes to show you, like, the issues within the Democratic Party, and why they are, like, yes, they won, right? You won with Biden in the White House, and yes, this last midterm election wasn't nearly as bad of a blowout as everybody thought it was going to be, but you could have made even more ground, with this particular seat, and who knows how many other seats they lost in similar fashion, right? Because the DNC was like, well, they're probably going to win, so we're not going to put anything behind you, and maybe somewhere there was an opportunity to gain another seat had the National Party gotten behind whoever the candidate was and supported him, right? And then and then the other question is their reasoning for the National Party to not support, the state elections and the local elections and different. Again, this is Congress, right? It's just insane that they didn't. That this is where we are with them, right? And to think that they didn't do this in New York and who knows where else, but yet but then in the same vein are like clapping their hands because, well, we didn't lose that bad in the midterms, right? Well, who knows? Maybe you didn't even have to lose had you been more strategic about actually winning, right? And you and I have both been very critical of the Democratic Party over the years, with their, amazing ability to screw things up,
whether it's fuck up a 2-car funeral.
Yeah, exactly. Whether it's losing elections or just poor messaging, or just saying the wrong thing at the wrong time. So many different screw ups, and again,
sure,
that just shows the fractures in the party. And they'll say all the right things, like the head of the DNC will come out and he'll probably deny or he won't acknowledge what happened in New York. And, he'll say all the right things about what the Democrats want to do and how the Republicans are being obstructionists. But, you can sit there and complain about Republicans and the GOP and Trump and everything else and MAGA and their following. But ultimately, when you're not doing the things you need to do to push those people out, right, to keep them out, to keep them out of power, you are as much of part of the problem as they are.
Yeah. And I think another thing that we don't need to get into, but also continually recycling the same group of people and not bringing in new, fresh faces and younger, that's something else they've been horrible at. When I hear, well, maybe Elizabeth Warren will run in 24, I'm like no. Pounding my head on the... Right. No, by the way, also a person who has some sketchy stuff on her resume.
Yeah. I mean, look, and I was one of the people who were just like, look, that was bullshit, right? Her claiming to be a Native American, and, I'm more Scandinavian than she is Native American, right? But you don't see me running around with a Swiss flag. Yeah. I mean, I do like Swiss watches, so
there you go.
I don't know. I do love me a good Swiss watch.
That's cultural appropriate. I believe that one.
Yep.
All right. Speaking of liars, let's talk about Trump and January 6th. I know that everyone's talking about the potential for him being indicted, which I'm going to be curious about. I've seen multiple interviews with him where he looks like he's coming apart. Now, I'm watching segments shown to me by media outlets, mostly through YouTube, but the Young Turks and David Packman and those guys, and they're trying to illustrate those moments. So I can't say that he's falling apart, but I think he is facing legal pressures that go beyond anything he's ever thought he would face. And he's now claiming he deserves pure immunity because he was the president. I did nothing wrong. And I don't know. Do you suspect he'll be indicted?
Look, I mean, he's getting backed into a corner, right? And he has been, really since January 6th.
Sure.
Had he just lost gracefully, right? Which is, I know, really hard to imagine because for the last, 7 years, really the last 30 years, I guess, you've had to deal with him. So we know that that's not going to happen. But had he just said, all right, fine, I lost. He could have just literally said, I lost, you guys suck, and I'm going down to Mar-a-Lago and screw you all. Right.
And you're going to regret it. You'll
regret it. I'm awesome. You'll want me back. And when I do, I'm going to come back in a blaze of glory. But until then, fuck off. Got on his plane, gone down to Mar-a-Lago, then he probably wouldn't be dealing with almost any of this. Oh, and by the way, leave all the documents in the White House, right? If you leave the shit in the White House and you just go away, you're not dealing with this. But I think part of it is because there was all the shit that they did that was, who knows what they did behind closed doors. That's part of the reason why I'm sure they said, screw it, just take everything, because who knows what they'll find in there that's probably highly illegal. And he makes this big stink about, election fraud and everything else. He brings it on himself. But now he's brought all this shit, all this attention to himself. He's backed into a corner. There's more stuff with January 6th coming out. You've got his taxes coming out. He's going to be, stuff with January 6th. The January 6th committee is referring that the DOJ, investigate for criminal activity. So, yeah, he's feeling the pressure. Now, will they? I don't know. Merrick Garland is very slow and meticulous and calculated, and which is good, except, look, clock's ticking here. He's already declared that he's running for president again.
Right.
You could argue that maybe he did that to help sort of complicate matters in terms of indicting him and everything else, which I buy that. And listen, it probably does, because I could easily see Merrick Garland, right? We get to 2024, right? And he's still, slowly going through his process, and it becomes September, October, and he's got a lot of information, but he's still not just quite ready. Well, that's problematic, right? Because if you think that this guy, that you have enough or almost enough to indict him, and because you're just dragging your feet on all this stuff and going through everything 20 times and everything else, and look, you need to be diligent, but you have to be able to move fast, because if you don't, then you may have someone that you want to indict, but then if he gets elected again, right, then what are you going to do? Because then, a guy like Merrick Garland, now I got to look, and he's going to go to the Supreme Court, and he's going to ask for all sorts of opinions, and then Trump might be, 3 years into another term before Merrick Garland finally says, all right, I've got everything I need, right? Will he get indicted? I don't know, right? Should he? For the stuff with the documents alone, I think that he should be indicted there, right? We have a law that you can't do it, and he just blatantly did it, right? So it's just people are like, well, Obama did it. No, Obama didn't. No, Obama didn't, right? And it's not because I'm an Obama fanboy, right? It's because he didn't.
Right.
Right? All of Obama's shit is in his library. His library is controlled by the Department of Records.
Library of Congress.
Yes, the Library of Congress, right? They control all that stuff. So there's a chain of custody, right, that everything goes through, and then it goes into his library. Yes, he took a lot of documents, but those documents were taken through the proper chain of custody and through the proper processes, and now they're all in a library that's maintained by the Library of Congress. They are not, right? in a resort country club, spread out on a floor, stuffed in closets and safes and all that other shit, right down in Florida, where who knows, like cleaning people had access to it, whoever he had, because Trump likes to show off his office. I'm sure he's got giant pictures of himself and gold busts of himself that he likes to show people. Who knows who he had in there? You know, Saudi oil sheiks,
pictures of him
Russian oligarchs,
shooting lasers out of his eyes.
Whatever. Yeah, I mean, like and you know what? As ridiculous as the statement is that you just made, considering that he's got a trading card with him shooting lasers out of his eyes, like the one character from The Boys, I'm sure he's got a picture of it, right? I'm sure he's got a giant picture of it because he thinks it's awesome, which if I had something of a trading card that looked like a comic book, I'd probably have a giant one too, but that's the type of guy he is. He has it, and he wants to show it off, so who knows who he brought through there, who could have seen anything laying on the floor, right? Maybe even grab something. Who knows, right? And you can't say, oh, well, isn't it? Like, I don't know, right? This dude took official White House documents and just had them strewn all over the floor. Top secret, right? And, like, so anything could have happened, right? Like, now it's all on the fucking table, right? Like, I mean, he's had all sorts of people through Mar-a-Lago from all over the world, right? And who knows what they're, or are these people spies? Are these people, who are they? What it feels like someone could have easily taken something out of there, right, that has some level of significance or importance, and then, Trump gets into a certain position and they're like, hey, if you want out of this, we can get you out of it or whatever, but, if not, then if you don't do what we want, then I've got this, and it gets released to the media. I don't know.
Right. Well, or I think we talked about this several weeks back, but some of these documents may pertain to not U.S. nuclear secrets, but nuclear secrets for another country, and that in the hands of, let's say, Russia. If Russia knew where Israel's, nuclear arsenal was,
right,
that would be really dangerous. If they could do something with a nuclear weapon and not make it look like it came from them, and I know I'm going a little James Bond on you here, but that's the sort of thing that could result in a disastrous result. I don't suspect he'll get indicted, but I find this interesting because 3 weeks ago, had I asked you that question, you would have just said no, I think.
No. I mean, with the as it relates to the January 6th stuff, I mean, I don't know, right? I mean, because again, it's not because, I mean, I think there's enough that we know enough now from January 6th that I could make an argument for it, right?
Sure.
Moderate. I don't know if it's the strongest one. Is it enough to convince a jury to convict him? I don't know. And the DOJ likes to be really, really sure and assertive about, about bringing indictments that they believe that they can win. So I think my answer even then would be I don't know, because we've known about we've known a lot about January 6th well before that. Right. And so I also think, again, too, the Mar-a-Lago thing matters because when you say, do you believe he'll be indicted, I think he can be indicted for either or both. Right?
Okay.
I mean, I think the Mar-a-Lago thing there's a lot stronger possibility for an indictment. The January 6th thing is still iffy, right? I mean, I think it's possible, but I don't know if it's realistic. One, because, again, how slow the DOJ is going to move, especially under Merrick Garland. And then two, is there enough there to make a strong case? Like, because if you really don't like Trump, then for you it won't take much.
Sure.
Right? But if you're trying to do your job as a prosecutor, being objective and, taking the law and comparing it to the evidence that you have, right? Because at the end of the day, it comes down to what you can prove, right? It's not what you want to prove or not the outcome that you want. It's what can I actually prove, right? And we know a lot of different things, and people like to say circumstantial. I think there's just a lot of evidence, but there are still holes. So the question is there something that can fill those holes to make all the connections to say, yes, we have enough to indict him and he's not going to be able to get out of it? And then you have to, if you don't have those connectors, then do you risk it because of the political impact of indicting a former U.S. president?
Right. Let's stay on January 6th for a minute, though. So some of the folks have been are on trial for insurrection. are now claiming what's called the sovereign citizens defense, which basically says, I'm not subject to U.S. law because I declare myself a sovereign citizen, which is an awesome thing to do. And by the way, if you're going to do that, don't call yourself a fucking patriot. Don't call yourself an American. You're literally saying, I'm shitting on America. So fuck right off. But that defense is not going to work. And the fact that...
Well, no. I mean, because they're using it as a defense now after the fact, right?
Right.
But I promise you that all these sovereign citizens, right? Well, did you vote in this election that you were so upset about? Also, if you're a sovereign citizen, then why do you give a shit about the President of the United States?
That's also a good point.
But then it's, did you vote? And do you have a job? So in that job, are you like paying taxes?
You have a social security
You have a
number?
social security number? Like, where do you live? Like, all these sort of things where it's just like, I don't know if you're a sovereign citizen, if you've got all these benchmarks that, you know, we basically say this is what makes you a U.S. citizen. So, I mean, it's a bullshit defense. You know, they have, again, this is the bar that Trump has set, you know, and because he's, to this point, really not suffered real consequences for his, you know, statements, actions, everything else, you know, people are just like, well, if he can do it, I can do it. And, you know, so a lot of these people are finding out that they can't.
Right.
They're like, one, it's just different. It's not the same. You're not playing on the same field that Trump is playing on. And frankly, you're doing a really bad job of it, right? Like, if you're going to claim the whole sovereign citizen thing, then you better be able to be, you know, show that you're a sovereign citizen. And a lot of these people can't, right? I mean, the court's going to be like, look, you do this, this, and this. That makes you an actual citizen of the United States. And because of that, you are eligible to be, you know.
You're responsible under the law and...
You're going to jail.
Yeah. Well, and I just want to... There's a story out of Maryland where a group of Moroccans took over a gun range and were just blazing away. And this is an rural area in Maryland where gunfire is not a rare thing. And I've actually been in that general area, and it's very country.
So have I.
Yes, you have as well. Very country. So gunshots are not a big deal. But anyway, this was apparently excessive. The police came in, and they said, we're Moorish. We're not subject to U.S. law. Sorry, folks. So, but first of all, if you're going to buy the argument from the MAGA folks, then you got to back the Moors, too. Second of all, it's a bullshit argument.
Yes.
And I actually, years ago, when I was driving for Lyft, I met a kid who claimed that he was not subject to paying a parking ticket because he was Moorish.
I mean, look, this is my response. If I'm a law enforcement officer that comes across a person who says that they are Moorish or a sovereign citizen and not subject to U.S. law, well, in that case, you are not subject to due process, sir. So I can do whatever the fuck I want to you. And guess what? Well, with the Moors, the police were outgunned. But with everybody else, it's like, all right, well, I'm going to do what I want to do since I don't have to play by the rules since you're not a U.S. citizen, right? Like, you're a sovereign citizen. You don't have protections under the law here, sir.
Well, I'm very anti-Guantanamo Bay.
I'm not.
This is an
I am
example
absolutely not. I had no issue with it. Everybody was real upset. I was like, this is fine.
All right, well, we disagree there. But for these folks, Gitmo, here you come. There's a lot of infighting in the Republican Party, too. Oh, my God. Lauren Boebert and Marjorie Taylor
Why did you
Greene.
say it like that? Oh, my God, there's so much infighting in the Republican Party. Oh, my God.
I don't think that was a very accurate imitation, but moving...
Play the tape back.
Hey, people can listen. Seriously, though, I mean, they are the push to who's going to be speaker, and Republicans who are like, we're pro-Trump, we don't want Kevin McCarthy, because Kevin McCarthy wasn't
But what's
sufficiently
interesting
loyal.
is Marjorie Taylor Greene struck up a little deal with Kevin McCarthy. She's
Yes.
the biggest Trumper of all the Trumpers, and yet she is very pro-Kevin McCarthy. I don't know what that deal was. I guarantee you, though, it has something to do with the committee that she's going to sit on that she wants to be on, which is why she's doing it.
I was about to say that.
You know? So, you know, she let off a tweet. Whenever I can, if I went back on Twitter and looked at her timeline, I can almost tell you, I could probably pinpoint when she struck the deal with Kevin McCarthy, because she went on a tear about how great of a speaker he's going to be, and we need unity, and we need to the Republican Party needs to unify behind Kevin McCarthy as speaker, and he wants to do all the things that are right, and he supported Trump, and blah, 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 blah. completely ignoring the whole thing where Kevin McCarthy was the main one considering the 25th Amendment after January 6th. But there's infighting about this, right? About who's going to be the speaker, who's going to, have the gavel and the control in the House. And that's an important role, right? I mean, there's an argument that, listen, we saw something similar even with Nancy Pelosi, right? Like there were a lot of Democrats, the Squad, AOC, and all of them. They didn't want Pelosi as speaker, and they made a big stink about it. And because it's a very important role, you look at some of the things that Nancy Pelosi did during her time as speaker. And again, I'm not a huge fan of Nancy Pelosi, but what I can say is, I mean, the woman put on a clinic on how to wield power. Yeah, and she did a pretty damn good job considering everything that was out there. I think there were a couple gaps that she could have avoided that ended up giving the Republicans and MAGA ammunition. But nonetheless, utmost respect for Nancy Pelosi. But as it relates to Kevin McCarthy, again, this is a very important role. So that the fact that they're fighting over who's going to sit in that seat, to me, is I mean, it's relevant, it's news, but I don't think it shows that this is the thing that's going to rip the party apart, right? Where it's, I don't think the fighting over this, because Kevin McCarthy's probably going to win it sounds like, and he's going to be the speaker, and once he's there, then he's there, right?
Sure.
And then they'll go back to their, normal nonsense.
You make a good point, because Pelosi is, essentially the ultimate mainstream Democrat.
Yeah.
And the AOCs and the Ilhan Omar's, the Squad, they're sick and tired of the, party line, business as usual Democrats, and they wanted to shake things up, and Nancy Pelosi represented the exact opposite of it. So you're right. Yeah, there was infighting there too, and it ultimately didn't amount to much. I think you're correct. This just feels a little bit more fun because you got in the level of infighting with the Democrats. It was AOC saying, I want change, I want progress, I want this. Here you've got Lauren Boebert and Marjorie Taylor Greene sniping at each other. So maybe it's just fun from a catfight perspective, and I'm just being a douche. But but it's funny. So totally changing gears. Yet another Russian oligarch, big shot, has managed to fall through a window. They're calling it Russian window cancer. and I saw the list of names, and the names don't mean anything to me. They wouldn't mean anything to our audience. But it's almost gotten to the point where, well, not almost, it's gotten to the point where if you do anything to offend or appear disloyal to Putin, your life is on the line. That's been true for a long time, but now it's this inner circle. And it shows to me how fragile his hold of power is.
Yeah, so, so obviously I track this. I mean, for whatever reason, I'm infatuated with Russia, but not because I think it's great, but it's just such a, it's like, watching a train wreck.
Everything from slapping contests to...
Yeah, it's just a bizarre place. But, it's funny. So I was in Columbus, and I was at a cigar bar. Shocking.
Yep.
And there were these two older gentlemen. I would say probably, I know that they were in their 70s. And they were talking geopolitics. And I was doing my own thing, but they said something about the whole Russian-Ukraine thing, about, U.S. should just go in there with the military and wipe them out and it'll be over. And I had to jump in. It was like, well, that means NATO has to get involved. And now you've got literally World War III on the European continent. And, most of Europe doesn't have the stomach for that. And we don't really want to do that. Do we really want to send our people over into this sort of thing? Do we really need a war? No one needs a war right now. The Russians and Ukraine are in one. We don't need to make it bigger. But the other, we kept talking, and where we got to was, the one guy said, well, I think at some point that one of the Russian generals, he made it was a little bizarre, because the point he made was that one of the Russian generals whose wives would convince him to kill Putin because too many, she lost a son, or she's watching too many sons die, right? And nothing stronger than a mother's love. That was his argument. And it's kind of good, I guess, whatever. But I think the reality is, I think it's more one of these Russian oligarchs that he continues to throw off roofs and throw through windows.
Allegedly.
I think that they are going to get tired of this war because it's costing them money. And ultimately they will I'm assuming will give him an ultimatum. And then if he refuses to back off and pull out, then one of them will have him killed, right?
He's hard to kill, though.
I mean, he is very Steven Seagalish, but I get that, but I also think that, listen, these Russian oligarchs a lot of these guys have survived a while, and I think if anybody could figure it out, right, like then they could. Now, I think all of this is very hard, it's very speculative and whatever.
Are these folks ending up dead because Putin suspects this might be the guy to finally do Brutus versus Caesar thing?
That's the kind of where I was going. This could already be in motion, right? But, Putin, like you said, he's hard to kill. And, so I think maybe he could be trying to, kind of get ahead of it a little bit. So if he gets any sort of wind that someone mentioned it or said something that was out of line or out of character or something like that, then he gets a little nervous and he says, easy fix, out the window you go. But I think you're right. His hold on power is fragile. I think his ego is damaged and also fragile, and he clearly is lashing out. The Russians unleashed another massive missile attack on Ukraine today. So it's unfortunate because I think what that means though is that we're not going to see an end to this thing anytime soon, right? People are, you and I talked about the winter that's coming. Well, the winter's here and they're still fighting. I don't think the Ukrainians are going to back down. I think Putin's going to continue to push through. He clearly doesn't care how many Russians die in this. And ultimately, what's his end game, right? Like, what's Putin's end game now, right? I mean, who knows what it was to begin with? I'm sure it has had to have shifted. Is it really about control of Ukraine, or does he just want to see Zelensky dead, right? What exactly? Because at that point, if we don't know, I really don't have an idea of, obviously he wants the Ukrainians to surrender and
sure.
For him to have control and maybe install his own government or just reabsorb Ukraine as part of Russia. But it feels like, man, so you're going to reabsorb this country that's been literally destroyed. There's are you going to rebuild it or what? So it's just hard to see a good reason for why he wants to continue to do this, and that's the problem, right? Because whatever his reasoning is, I think is beyond just practical thinking.
I think going in, he thought he could take over Ukraine in a couple weeks.
Everybody,
I did, and he clearly wants to reestablish the old Russian Empire, the USSR, and it's not going well. The resilience of Ukraine has been awe-inspiring, and what they're going through is terrible. I want to talk about the storm in Buffalo because I was there, and the whole time I was there, I was thinking, as frustrating as it was to be stuck in a house for 72 straight hours and not able to go anywhere, and a driving ban, and all these things. It was cold, and I was sleeping in a bedroom that was roughly 50 degrees. It was miserable, but I'm thinking at the same time, I'm thinking, telling myself, shut the fuck up. Because to put yourself in the shoes of my shoes, I'm actually pretty lucky. If we could talk about, okay.
I mean, look,
the storm,
you weren't in a situation that, many Ukrainians are facing without power in a really cold place and winter, in the middle of a war, their whole lives ripped apart. No, that's not you. But, I mean, that's not the situation you're in. And the situation that you were in, based on your text to me, sounded awful.
It was awful. I'm not denying it was awful. And the personal stuff we'll talk off air. Sorry, folks, but it won't make sense to you. But
and you don't want to get in trouble with your mom.
And I don't want to get in trouble with my mom. You're right. Fine, bitch.
You're going to get in trouble with your mom because you called me a bitch.
No. It's the C word I can't use for my mouth.
No, but I think your mom likes me, and she doesn't want you calling me a bitch.
Well,
and you're going to hear about it.
We will see. But
I'm going to tell her to tell you about it. Nancy.
It's funny so my mom asked me, do you have an emergency contact? So if something happened to you, would we know about it? And I said, Steve would know about it. She was like, oh, okay, we're friends on Facebook. And my landlord, you're not friends with me on Facebook? Yes, I am.
Yes.
But no, the storm, honestly, there was one storm when I was like 12 years old that, obviously rewinding that many years, reminded me of something this bad. This is the worst storm I've ever experienced. When
this was worse than the storm in 1918?
We're going to take a moment for Steve to enjoy his joke.
Jim's staring at me.
Yeah, I'm just giving the dead silent stare.
He is giving me the Samuel L. Jackson stare of motherfucker.
I don't remember asking you a damn thing. No, it was bad. I actually narrowly. Okay, I'm going to tell this part of the story. I was staying at a friend's place, and my aunt says, "Stay with us because it's going to get bad." I wanted to stay in a hotel because I like having my own space. I made it to my aunt's place 30 minutes before they instituted a driving ban. So I got there. I was there to help. I was there to cook and whatever. Had I missed that window, my aunt, mom, and sister would have been stuck at the house with me outside of it, and I would have looked like the asshole of the century. So, yes. Storm of the century, asshole of the century. I thankfully made it. Was it a wonderful experience? Not exactly, but
the cold room would have been my biggest issue.
Being stuck in a house where you could not get out for 3 straight days, and having everyone's neuroses exposed at the same time was challenging. When I'm around my sister, who will not listen to the show, I feel like I'm under a microscope every time I touch a drop of alcohol. I did not get drunk once during that 72-hour stretch. Had I been left to my own devices, I would not have been sober for a minute of that. Now, I did... changing topics again. I did watch 7 episodes of Yellowstone.
It's fantastic.
It's a fantastic show. So I watched I couldn't get the first 4 seasons on Paramount.
Yeah, it's weird how it's a Paramount show, but you can't watch it on Paramount Plus. And
it's on Peacock or whatever.
It's.
I don't know how that works. So I watched an hour-long YouTube summary of the first 4 seasons, so I would know what I was getting into, and then I watched 7 episodes of Yellowstone. And yes, it is fantastic.
Yeah. I mean, you got to try to watch.
I will go back and watch it. I will. But I was able to keep track of okay, I know this person is this, and I know, this person isn't around anymore. A lot of folks aren't around anymore.
Yeah, they have no issue with killing a motherfucker on Yellowstone.
This is like Game of Thrones, Sopranos-esque. No one's safe. I think Kevin Costner's safe.
Yeah.
Other than that,
people just oh, don't you want to go to Montana after watching Yellowstone? I was like, no, because everybody dies out there. No.
Right.
I'm not a part of the Dutton family or whoever the big ranch is there in real life. So no, I'm not taking my black ass out there.
But all right, I didn't want to. We didn't plan on going down this road, but to me, it's really interesting politically in the sense that if you are from Montana and you're happy with being isolated, doing your own thing, and now I'm finger quoting, progress is coming. Airports and, now the money from California, the money from New York is coming. I know plenty of people who, in that situation, would have that exact same mindset of, stay the fuck out of my...
This place is not even nice. I mean, the place where I'm from, Youngstown, Ohio, is the same damn way. I mean, it's...
anti-progress, yes, but they have an airport.
Right. It's... the thing I do appreciate, Yellowstone, it's not real. We know it's not real. It's fiction, right? But I just spent some time in New Mexico, right?
Right.
And I got out there, and the thing that blew me away was the view, right? I'm driving down, 75 or whatever, or 25. I can't think of the main highway that cuts through New Mexico that gets you from Albuquerque to Santa Fe. But either way, just the view of the mountain. And, not even being able to figure out how far it is because there's nothing. There's nothing between. There's this highway and there's this giant strip of land that's miles and miles and miles long. And then there's this giant mountain that goes up into the clouds. And it just blew my mind about how amazing it was. Right? It's sort of, it's just something like in Ohio, we don't have mountains. We don't have views like that.
Correct.
We've got the Great Lakes, which in and of itself is amazing, but it's just different. So seeing that, I could absolutely understand why you would fight to keep it, right? you would fight because you don't want high-rise hotels blocking views like that, or so that only the rich people can see that. You don't want all these people coming in and crowding, your local restaurants that are amazing, that are fantastic, but yet then you get all these yuppies from New York and California that've got money from Netflix and Apple and everything else that are coming in and sucking up all the resources, because it's just a spot where they think it's cool and they vacation. So I completely understand fighting it. There's actually something very, very Yellowstone-esque going on in Santa Fe, where you've got a person who was from there who went out to Silicon Valley, made a lot of money, came back and wants to do this big development. And, he took some pictures of himself with a shovel and a hard hat, but he's got his, tie on standard. Right? The people there completely push back against it, like, no, you're not one of us. We don't like any of this. And, you want to build this big development and it's going to block the views? No. Right? And you can see and you can feel the tension was palpable when I was in Santa Fe over that particular deal. Now, I'm there for similar real estate stuff, but my stuff is much more friendly, affordable housing people. It's great. But you could feel it, right? And I could also feel that there was also this, you could also see the tension between the Native Americans and the white people, and there's also the Latino community. And there's issues there, right?
Sure.
And, as a black guy in New Mexico, I'm like, wow, this is weird. No one even gives a shit that I'm here. This is great. Like the Native Americans.
We've got our own problems.
Right. The Native Americans and the white people are pissed at each other. The white people and the Mexicans are pissed at each other. It's just like, let me just stay over here and see what happens. But I can understand the mindset of people like the Duttons saying, like, you're not going to take this from us. Right. And a guy like John Dutton, guys like him exist.
Yeah.
Right? Like, guys like him exist. There's, a lot of these farms and a lot of these ranches that they do provide a lot of sustenance for the country as a whole. And they're fighting their own battles right now with technology and pricing and China and South America and everything else. Like, there's just so much that these guys are up against, and I'm sure they're just like, look, we're trying to keep this ranch, and we're not going to let you come in and ruin everything by throwing an airport in and trying to turn this into, some sort of vacation resort land. Yeah, I don't know.
All right. Well, anyway, I got to watch 7 episodes of it in 2 days. But one thing that was said during the blizzard, there was looting going on. And I always have my ear perked up when I hear that, because was it looting or was it surviving? Because if people broke into gas stations and grocery stores and stuff, and look, the conditions were unbelievable. I had not been in a storm like that, with the possible one exception of the 1918 storm that Steve referenced earlier. I'm empathetic to that. Like, if I've got to break down a plate glass window to feed myself, I would do that if it meant me living or dying. Having said that, the looters that they arrested, I saw the video. They were smashing, grabbing. They were grabbing TVs. They were vandalizing. The mayor called them the lowest of the low. And I remember a friend of mine saying, when Katrina happened, like, there was a picture of white people pushing a canoe full of food, and it was white people are being, surviving, and black people are looting. And I do think there is that media perception sometimes, and I was prepared to come on, talk to you and say, these are people in desperate situations surviving. So this was bad.
Yeah.
This was really fucking bad.
And so, earlier we talked about, Democrats, right? And their just terrible job of messaging, right? And so this is an area where, if people were just going in and going, breaking windows in Best Buy and taking TVs out and DVD players, or people even take those, I don't know why, but, just taking shit out of Best Buy that has nothing to do with surviving a terrible winter storm, then, you're looting, you're committing a crime. That's bad. And Democrats should, and if they're black, then so be it, right?
Sure.
And the problem is, Democrats would see something like that, right, in AOC or whoever, and would come out and just they would try to just make the argument that you made. These people are just surviving, and we shouldn't condemn them because they're just trying to live in this terrible situation, right? As opposed to just look, that's not right. They shouldn't be doing that. That's absolutely ridiculous. I don't care who you are. There's no excuse for you to break into a electronics store and steal shit that is not rightfully yours just because no one's in a position to stop you. And if you had unity on sort of things like that, right? Because and not going into, well, what are the conditions that led them to the point where they had to steal a TV? Like, there's no condition where you have to steal a TV. There's just not.
Right.
Right. Like, I mean, the time and energy you're using to break into a place and commit a felony, you can easily put that into something else that's more productive, right?
Steve, there were dudes just smashing stuff. Just like, I'm going to break stuff. Like, you're not even gaining anything out of it. You're just doing damage.
Right.
Sorry.
No. I mean, you're right. I mean, I think, look, there are issues and there are circumstances that are bad that lead people to make very bad decisions repeatedly.
Sure.
And after a while, like, their minds sort of get set in a groove pattern. And that's unfortunate, but you can't get a pass for bad behavior because your circumstances are bad, right? Now, what has to happen is that we have to address the circumstances that lead people to do these sort of things, but there still needs to be accountability for those particular bad actions, right? And you can't sweep that under the rug, So, yes, you had the storm of the century, and yes, maybe these people were in really shitty situations, but again, them stealing a TV, even if they're stealing a TV to sell it, I'm sorry, they're stealing a TV so that they can sell it, so they can get money to do this. Like, that's still wrong.
Yes.
Right? Like, I mean, if you've got hungry kids at home that you need to feed, or they need diapers or whatever, then you go raising Arizona and you just go steal the damn diapers. You go steal the food. That
great reference, by the way.
Right. I'll defend that all day. Right, but what I won't defend is, well, I'm going to go break into Best Buy, I'm going to steal this TV, and then I'm going to sell the TV, and then I'm going to take that money, and then that's what I'm going to use to feed my kids, because realistically, that's not what's happening.
Right.
Right, like, it's just not. If
that money isn't going to
that money isn't going to feed kids. It's not going to get diapers and everything else, right? And if it is, I'm sorry, then you're going about it the wrong way. Sure. Right. Again, if that's the issue, then just go steal the food, go steal the diapers, go steal the clothes, right? But I can't give you a pass because you have a shitty situation and you do a very shitty thing, right? Like, I mean, and if you do a shitty thing, and if the shitty thing is then, like I said, breaking in and steal the necessities, then we can have a conversation, right? Then it's, what can I do to help you? Right, like, this is bad. I'm willing to make it go away if you allow us to help you to get into a better situation, right? But again, like, the looting and smashing just for the sake of it because I'm angry because I'm in a bad situation, that's not going to fly.
And some of these were in convenience stores in neighborhoods. We talk about food deserts all the time. So the people that have the civic responsibility to say, I'm going to open a store and sell food in a bad neighborhood in Buffalo, and my reward for being there is for you to do this to us.
Yeah.
I mean, to me, that is, you're shitting on your own community.
Yeah, I mean, well, now, look, it gets even more complicated because a lot of time the convenience stores are owned by, like, Middle Eastern people or Asian people, and the relationship there is very tense, right? Every urban setting, like, it's a very, very tense relationship.
That's also true.
For multiple reasons, right? That, again, like, you can dig into those, but for the people breaking into those stores, right, and stealing, robbing the people, maybe threatening, beating people up, like, that's... Those things need to be addressed, and they need to be addressed by both Republicans and Democrats, and called out for what it is. But again, then that's also an opportunity to talk about solutions to prevent people from getting to that point.
Right. Yeah, we're already going to go long, but I want to talk about two sports-related things. And the ugly one first. So Philadelphia, not known for having the classiest sports fans, lost to the Dallas Cowboys last week, and someone with an, like, Eagles 2 or some, tweeted at Dak Prescott, I'm glad your mom died. I'm glad your brother died. I hope your other brother is next. And I'm paraphrasing, but that's what he wrote. And I don't want to, say anything more than, hey, Twitter, you're all about, what your terms of service or whatever. Telling a person, regardless of the fact that they're a professional athlete, that you're glad their loved ones are dead and you hope another loved one of theirs dies soon, is so disgusting that person needs to be called out, banned from Twitter, and it ain't a free speech thing. I'm not saying that person should go to jail for it. I would love to see them publicly exposed, though. I would love to see them get their face and name. Hey, here's the person who posted, hey, Dak Prescott, I wish these awful things on you. I'm no Cowboys fan. I cannot believe that someone would choose to put that out there and tag a celebrity or a professional athlete, knowing it would get, if they didn't know it was going to get the exposure it did, they should have. And just, that was one of the grossest tweets I've ever seen.
I would argue that you have not spent enough time on Twitter then.
You know what? You're right. You're right. You spend way more time on Twitter than I do.
Yeah. It gets really ugly. Especially sports fans are, it's not just Philly. Especially
they are the gold standard.
They are, but people get, especially about sports, people get really nasty. We see it a lot. They have no issues with going to things like dead family. They have no issues going race. They have no issues just being downright despicable. And a lot of it is because they can hide, right? Because they feel that there's no repercussions for those actions, right? Like, oh, I get suspended on Twitter for 30 days. Oh, well, whatever. I'll go to Twitter jail, and then I'll be back, and I'm going to keep being an asshole. There's no real punishment for it. There's no accountability, so people have no reason to even have a filter, right? I mean, these are the type of people in person where if a guy like me or even you flinched at, or just moved at them a little bit, right? Like they probably shit themselves, right? Like, I mean, it's just it's unfortunate. It's just there's so many people like that. People love to what they do is people love to, like, how they feel that they can neutralize me is like they'll say really shitty things, right, that are rude and everything. You saw it when we were at the patio bar that time, and that guy like took my beer and drank it and talked all that shit. But the whole,
he was in person.
He was in person, and he almost ceased to exist as a person. But the whole point is that people, what they'll do, especially with a guy like me, is they have no issue pushing my buttons, and there's no fear, because ultimately they're like, well, you do. The police, blah, 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 blah. Like, so you can't, there's nothing that you can do, because if you do anything to me, then you have all these consequences, right? So they have no issue just sort of running their mouth. And now, every now and again, you get a guy like me who gets a couple drinks in him and gets a little pissed off, and then you end up having to run out of there.
Well, just to give some background, a guy being a complete asshole to Steve, and I restrained Steve, and I air quoted that because I literally put my hands on his chest, pushed him back, and said, "Not worth it, not worth it, not worth it." It was like I was calling Beetlejuice. It was.
Yeah, I do remember in that moment that there was a brief moment where I was going and you weren't really stopping, and then it clicked in my head, so I slowed down, but I was already going that direction, so I figured I might as well continue to go that direction to scare him. But I had already decided not to throw him through the window.
Yes.
But that was my initial thought. I was just going to grab him. I literally was going to grab him and throw him through the window.
And there's a great big window to throw him through.
Yeah.
All right. We got to wrap this up. But Pele passed away today. Neither of us know. I know more about Pele from the movie Victory, starring Sylvester Stallone. But it is worth mentioning. But also, Franco Harris passed away.
And it's just so sad, just the timing, right? Like, so, first of all, Franco Harris, great guy, right? Like, I mean, he just... he really embodied Pittsburgh, but he was just a really happy, joyful soul. And just like every time you saw him, every time someone talked to him, just a great big smile. He lit up the room. He lit up the screen when he was on it. There's not a single person that has anything bad to say about Franco Harris. There's just not one. He was just loved everywhere, beloved by the entire NFL, beloved by the city of Pittsburgh, and really anyone he ever came in contact with. I mean, people just, all over social media, just sharing these amazing stories of how he met them and impacted them. And, all of them, he stood there and talked to me 10, 15 minutes, right? It's a hard loss. And it was, the celebration of the Immaculate Reception, which, happened before I was born in 1973. But it was still, it's still like really the penultimate play in the NFL. And really something that really boosted boosted the frequency of the NFL, that really kind of changed a lot, right?
Yeah.
Just in terms of like how the NFL games were broadcast, just to watching into the last minute because of all these amazing things. Like it really is this play that is sort of the gold standard for amazing. And it was a tough loss, and for him to not be able to sort of take that last victory lap in the stadium.
You left out the fact that they were about to.
Yeah, they were gonna. Well, I didn't leave it out. I just wasn't there yet. Like take that last victory lap in the stadium. With the crowd there cheering him on, and then being able to finally see his number 32 retired forever. The Steelers do not retire numbers often, right? I think maybe they have retired 3 numbers.
You would know better than me.
But they do not do it often, and it's just a rare thing in that organization. So for Franco, this was huge, right?
Yeah.
And the timing was perfect. They were playing the Raiders. The Steelers were playing the Raiders during the Immaculate Reception. You have this crazy play where Jack Tatum just destroys Frenchie Fuqua, right? Like Tatum comes like a missile, right? A play that he would get a flag for and thrown out of the game today, and the ball reflected off of Tatum, and I have to say that because there was a rule back then had it reflected have to deflect it off Frenchie Fuqua, then it would have been illegal, whatever.
Which you did.
I've watched enough replays where it looks like it definitely came off Tatum.
Let's go with that.
Either way, but Franco was right there, and what's funny about that? So on that actual play, it was a max protection, and Franco was supposed to block. But if you watch the play, Franco blocks no one. Right, the people so what happens is Franco doesn't block anybody, right? He just kind of goes out there. The guy that he probably should have blocked ends up hitting Terry Bradshaw and taking him down, and Terry just throws his pass as it's going down, and then Tatum takes out Fuqua, the ball bounces, Franco Harris just grabs the ball by his fingertips like a centimeter away from the ground. Runs it into the end zone, dodges the tackle, shakes the guy off, and then he goes in the end zone, game over, Steelers advance in the playoffs. Wasn't even a championship game, but that was their first time in the playoffs, and that was their first, big win, and then all of a sudden you launch the 4 Super Bowl victories and the steel curtain and everything else. The funny part about that actually is from Terry Bradshaw, who, when he threw the pass, he thought it was a perfect pass. Terry Bradshaw thought he threw a perfect pass that landed in the receiver's hands, and the receiver just, Frenchie Fuqua ran and scored a touchdown, and he was just like, I'm an amazing quarterback. Like, he literally, like, his words, he was like, I just knew I was the best quarterback, and he was talking about, thinking in his head about the endorsements he was going to get, and he didn't even see the play until well after the game, and doesn't realize everything that happened. So it's just kind of amazing from his vantage point what he thought happened, and then, which would have been amazing.
Yeah.
But this is that much more. So, it's a sad day for the city of Pittsburgh and the Steelers. For me, my dad was a huge Franco Harris, and again, before I was born, so I never got to see him play. But I'm a NFL junkie, so I've probably seen more games from before I was born. Well, not since I've been born. I just watched a lot of games. I watched football. Leave me alone. Shut up.
So
shit.
Two things. My favorite story about that, I don't remember where I heard it, but so Franco scores a touchdown. The referees are huddled, and they're huddled for several minutes. The Steelers fans are pouring onto the field, and I've heard a story, and one of the referees is on the phone, and I've heard it said that the referee asked the question, how many security guards do we have here? 6. Touchdown.
I wonder if that's true.
I don't know. Yeah. I just love that story. And truthfully, if I'm in that situation, there's 10,000 people on this, or 1,000 people on this field, whatever. I'm not going to go, oh, by the way, that didn't count.
Right.
Go home. Sorry about that.
Yeah.
And I also have to think about today, that would have been the most awful thing ever. Because they would have microanalyzed that thing to the point where it would have taken them an hour and a half to go, well, it looks like the ball might have slipped a little bit. Now, I'm all for technology and replay, but that would have been analyzed to death. And
it still has been. What was that, 2018 when Jesse James for the Steelers catches a touchdown pass against the Patriots, and then after reviewing it for literally like 10 minutes, they come back and say no touchdown.
He didn't complete a football play. Or whatever the fuck they said.
It was ridiculous. But I mean, to your point, yes, that's exactly what would have happened. But ultimately, you probably would have just, you would have had to
ruling
accept
on the field
result.
stands. And shoot, I forget what I was going to say. I don't know either.
Show's over.
Show's over. Okay. We are at Whiskey Congress on Instagram and Twitter. Thank you for listening. We are done. Happy New Year.